Hi, my name is Khleif, and I'm the host of the Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing podcast. And every week I interview multifamily rock stars, and we talk about how they've built incredible wealth for themselves and their families through multifamily properties. So hit the like and subscribe buttons to get notified every Monday when a new episode comes out. Let's get to it.
Welcome to another edition of How to Build Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing. I'm Khleif, and I'm absolutely thrilled that you're here. Very excited to interview the gentleman we're interviewing today because he's got kind of a unique start to life in general. So his name is Dan Breezy, and Dan is a professional snowboarder. And now he's got over 1,200 doors as a GP and an LP. And it's just such a unique start to getting into the multifamily business. I'm really excited to dig into how that transpired. Welcome to the show, brother.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rod. I'm stoked to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So take us back. How does somebody get started snowboarding? Well, I don't want to take your thunder away. I want you to brag because it's very impressive what you've accomplished in that field, and then obviously what you've done in the multifamily space as well. But take us back if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so, I found snowboarding through my cousin. When I was 11, 12 years old, my cousin shows up with a snowboard, and we were riding it in his backyard. And I just remember thinking, this is so much fun, and it's something that I couldn't stop thinking about. So, I ended up getting a snowboard eventually. I worked for it, a summer job, and ended up getting a season pass at Powder Ridge in central Minnesota, which is where I grew up. There wasn't a lot to do in Minnesota in the wintertime. So, winter sports were what I loved. And I loved doing sports already. And my parents were pretty athletic, my dad specifically, and I love sports. So it really I latched on. And, after a couple years of riding here and there at our local resort, I started to get better. I started to excel a little faster than some of my friends. And I got better than my brother, which was a huge thing for me in my mind. And, just fell in love with the sport. And after a few years of riding, I kind of made this decision where I want to be a pro snowboarder, and I'm going all the way. So that was kind of the introductory of how it happened before leaving high school.
Wow. So tell us how far you took it. I mean, I don't want to steal your thunder because it's very impressive. So
Yeah. So I ended up moving to Salt Lake City after high school, and I thought I was really good. I thought I was going to get paid soon. I thought I was like the next guy. And I realized how far away I really was from being a pro rider, getting in the mountains and getting around other athletes that have grown up in the mountains. I had a long ways to go. So I worked these night jobs, Blockbuster, Red Lobster. I mean, you name it. It was horrible work. Yeah. Every night I'd work and I would, snowboard during the day. And after 4 years, I finally got to the point where I went to a contest in Aspen, Colorado called the Aspen Open. I was so broke. My buddy drove me there and paid for my hotel. And I won that contest. It was 275 riders could come. It's just like the US Open in golf. Anyone who wants to show up can show up. You pay your $150 and you're riding. Yeah. And it's on the X Games course, which is in Aspen, Colorado. And with winning that, my career started to kind of take off with some of the brands who I've been riding for a long time.
No kidding. And I'm just going to say, you've won gold medals, you've won silver medals, you've competed in the X Games now 6 times. So when did you, was it an age thing? When did you transition into real estate?
Yep. Yeah. So midway through my snowboarding career, I became friends with a lot of my heroes, these guys who I only knew through movies, and they were getting to the end of their career. And I saw some of them come to these harsh endings and just, losing everything. And they'd have these big homes up on the mountain and be driving these really rad cars. And then it would just end. And I just didn't want to be that guy. So I started to read some books, get educated and try to understand what I could do when I'm done being a snowboarder so that I didn't have to go back to working at Red Lobster.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So after, like you said, I was fortunate to be in X Games 6 times. I got 2 gold medals there in an event called Real Snow and then a couple silver medals. But after that was kind of coming to a peak, I could see the writing on the wall that I maybe had 5 years left if I was lucky. So that's where, as I started getting educated with ProVision, a company that they do my CPA work, they basically, had some classes there. I started to take them with them, and I started to buy some smaller real estate on my own, duplexes, 9plexes, and I bought a 24-unit deal. And that's kind of my transition into multifamily and seeing what it could do for me with cash flow, forced depreciation, all the good stuff.
What market were you buying in, buddy?
Yeah, so I live up in Vancouver, Washington, or near Vancouver, Washington, just north of Portland, Oregon. And I bought in a little town called Longview, the duplex, and I bought a 9-unit deal in Chehalis, Washington, two very small markets. My timing was good. Markets were going up. I don't think you could have lost, but, came into those two markets. And then also, I grew up in Minnesota, it was St. Cloud, Minnesota, where I bought the third property, a 24-unit deal.
Well, I know you're in Phoenix now doing due diligence on an asset, so you certainly haven't stayed in the cold. So where are these, I know you're in 500 doors as a GP, 1,200 total. Where are the 500 that you're GP in?
Yep, we've got 4 in the St. Cloud, Minneapolis market. We've got 1 currently in DFW, and we're working on trying to break into Phoenix. Those are kind of our 3 markets that we're specializing, focusing in on building a team out and, trying to go vertical in those markets.
Nice. Yeah, we love Dallas. We've got an asset there that's just a home run all the way down the line. Love it. We're not in Phoenix. Actually, we try to stay southeast because we're in Florida, so it's just easier. Dallas, of course, you can get there from anywhere, but we haven't gone further west than that. But let's talk about. So here's an interesting question: how do you think your snowboarding expertise helped you in the multifamily business? What pieces of that helped you be a success in this business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I personally believe success is a habit. It's a way of thought. You find the right people that think the right way, you're going to get those results. So in snowboarding, for me, it was laser focus, one goal, no matter what. I was so committed to being the snowboarder that I was willing to die to be a pro snowboarder. And if you watch any of our videos, you'll see the risks we take were life threatening. So,
wow.
I think number one is first develop a burning desire for whatever you want, and then just don't quit. And if you have those, Think and Grow Rich. That's funny. I
just held up Think and Grow Rich because that's the first chapter of Think and Grow Rich. Have a burning desire. And by the way, I'm reading this again. I've read it probably 10 times, maybe more than that. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
I love that. When I said that, Burning Desire, I'm like, I should probably mention Think and Grow Rich, but I didn't. So I'm right there with you. I love that book too. I've read it several times. I probably should read it again as well. But, I think that's the biggest piece. And if you can harness that desire for a goal, and anyone can do it, you're basically programming your mind. You have the ability to program your mind, which is something that's just never talked about in school. And if you don't dig for the information, you might not ever figure that out. So those I would say are the biggest things is figure out a goal that very much excites you, that you have massive passion for, and then start focusing on what's in front of you now and just take baby steps every day and just don't quit. And I think that's the piece that will separate people from making it in anything. You got to have some natural ability, no doubt about it. I mean, you got to have something and usually if you love something, you're going to pick that piece. So those are the 2 pieces that I would say helped me the most with real estate.
Yeah, let me expand on what you just said because it was very, very powerful. And that's why the burning desire, that's why the first thing we do at any of my boot camps, including the live stream ones, is we spend an hour and 20 minutes on goals, getting very, very clear on what it is that you want and why you want it. Because if you don't know that, you're never going to get it. And so how are you going to get anything if you don't know what it is, number one? But you've got to have that burning desire to push through fear, to push through limiting beliefs, or to get uncomfortable. And you also touched on focus, and it never clicked with me, and that's why I'm glad I asked the question about the parallels between your previous career and this. Focus is you've got to be honed, or you lose your life in what you did before. And focus in this business, focus is power, and so the more you can enhance your focus, the more powerful you are. In fact, I listen to a podcast called Tim Ferriss, and I get excited because I've had 9 million downloads on my podcast. Well, I think he does that a week on his, but he dissects the best of the best people. He deconstructs the best in the world, athletes, and movie stars, Schwarzenegger, Ed Norton, Jamie Foxx, billionaires, Ray Dalio. I mean, the best of the best, politicians. And I started to notice a pattern because he deconstructs how they achieve their success. They all meditate. And I thought, well, what does meditation enhance? Focus. And so, I really wanted to hammer home that comment. And then the last thing you said was to take steps. You've got to take action, guys, even if they're small steps, because you said baby steps in your description. And that's a great, safe, non-intimidating way to describe it, but you got to move forward. And that was awesome, brother. it kind of ties into another topic that you and I thought we might dig into a little bit more, which is the word passion. One of my favorite words, if not my favorite word. So let's drill down on that a little bit. Where does that come into play?
Yeah, when I was young, my parents always told me they never did what they loved to do. That was all I heard growing up.
Wow.
And it still makes me tear up a little bit. You know, they're old and they didn't do what they wanted to do. Yeah. And, you know, with my parents saying, hey, Daniel, just do what you love. Yeah. So with that piece in mind, you know, for me, it was clear. I was like, okay, this may not work. And it was unknown, but I'd rather try and give it everything I got than always wonder, because I knew what it was like to wonder. So that's a piece I'm passionate.
Yeah. And you know, these lessons that we get, can swing either way. You know, it's so great that your parents said what they said, you know, because sometimes you will model what you see, and other times you'll use it as a, you know, as an example of the, you know, of choosing a different direction, which you did. Right. And so, but the key here, and the key to all of this, guys, is something he said, which is do what you love. And when you do what you love, and you can even make it a little more micro than that. In this multifamily business, it's critical that you play to your strengths. And so that might mean that you do the analysis on the deals, or it might mean you bring you might be the investor relations person because you're more outgoing. It might mean that you're the deal hunter and you're building relationships with brokers to find the deals, or you're great at operations and you're doing that piece. But if you focus on what you're good at, it's going to be something you love. And when you're doing what you love, then you're inspired, and that's the only way you're going to have passion. Would you agree with me, Dan?
100% agree. That's where the magic happens. If you can get into that zone where you're excited for Monday. You know, I hate the comment of happy Friday. I'm about happy Monday. I know that sounds odd, but that's just the way, you know, if you're in your strength zone and in your passion is you're excited to go to work. And that's what I think is the most rewarding piece, is if you can have income with something you love, not only are you probably gonna get paid the most because you're focused and your goal
is good at it, because you love it.
You're good at it. Right. So that's where it comes together. And I think if that was pushed a little more in society, instead of just go to college, like I'm for college if you know what you want to do and it's something you love to do. But if you don't want to go and you don't know what you're going to go for and you're going because your friends are going, just rethink that. You know, it doesn't mean that's the best path, especially in the information age, maybe in the industrial age, but things have changed. The world's changed. So I think that those are things that I want to make sure my kids understand. And I hope that younger people coming up, you don't just follow their parents' blind eye, because they're maybe giving you the best advice they have, but it might not be the best advice for you.
Well, it's the advice that it's all they know. And you know what, you know, I ask a question at my live events. It's, you know, who here went to college? Raise your hand. All right. Keep your hand up. If college taught you about mindset and psychology to go out there and conquer the world and create the life of your dreams, keep your hand up, and maybe one hand stays up, you know, and somebody didn't hear the question, but, you know, it's you know, we were talking about this before we started recording, and you know, my big thing is mindset and psychology. I believe 80 to 90% of your success in anything is your mindset and psychology. And, you know, and I got that hammered into me by someone I met early on. And then, of course, I spent 20 years with Tony Robbins, following him around the planet, and that's all it's about. But and guys, what I want to say to you about this is, if you don't love multifamily real estate yet, I would tell you to try to find a piece of it that you do love, or associate pleasure with something that you might love, and you can learn to love it. But if you end up not loving it, then for God's sakes, go do something else. Life is, do you agree with me, Dan?
I 100% agree with you. You know, if it's not for you, it's fine. Keep searching till you find what is for you.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. How do you feel about the market right now, and how do you feel about the future with what's happening with COVID and unemployment, and, you know, and a lot of businesses going under, and, you know, and things of that nature? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, it's concerning.
Right.
Very concerning as to how many businesses stick around. You know, is our market a free market now, or is it controlled with the Fed deciding who lives and who dies? You know, those are huge pieces. You know, the part I love about multifamily, and coming back to it, is it's a necessity, and you're in a market, you're swimming in this market, right? What's the story of the property in that market, and what can you do with it? What's the supply and demand? You know, how's the debt structure? And it's so favorable right now. So, as far as what's to come in the market economy, I'm not going to try to predict that. And I'm uncertain of it. But with that being said, I feel the best still placing capital in multifamily instead of letting it pile up in my bank account due to how much printing is being taken place.
Yeah, no question. Couldn't agree more. I interviewed Harry Dent, an economist, on my show, and it was the same conversation. Get in assets that pay you returns. He thinks the crash is coming for sure. I actually think it is as well. I got crushed in 2008, lost $50 million, and this feels like '07 to me, honestly. So
wow.
Yeah. And so, the reason I asked the question is, guys, if you're in the stock market, I would highly recommend you get out, because I really believe there's going to be a bump there, a big one. And whether or not the real estate crashes as much as I think it's going to, I've been wrong before. I'm wrong a lot. I just feel pretty strongly we're going to have some serious reset in this country. But it's not something to be afraid of. It's something to, yes, it's going to suck for a lot of people, and there's that. But I try to look at this through rose-colored glasses and look for opportunity, and there will be incredible opportunity if it does happen. But we're buying right now. We've got an asset under contract, and we're very, very conservative. Now, I don't know. Let me ask you a question. How are you stress testing your deals, buddy? And what are you doing for operating reserves today if you close on something? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. We are using an exit cap rate that's about a point higher than what we're buying at. Right. Will those go up with rates dropping? I don't think they will, truly. I really don't. But if they do, we've got some protection there. Mm-hmm. We're using historical rent growth in these markets based off of CoStar, based off of the last 10 years.
So you haven't adjusted the rent growth. You're still throwing in the 3% or whatever it is.
We do after 12 months. The first 12 months, we're keeping zero.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. First 12 months, no rent growth. And then, depending on the market, 1.5%, maybe 2% thereafter. Okay. We're trying to stick more to Freddie Mac debt instead of Fannie Mae, keeping more of our capital on hand. I'm a fan of Fannie Mae, but I like the liquidity in our bank account. Depending on
what kind of liquidity do you hope to keep? Do you have a metric for that? Or
yeah, we don't necessarily a metric. We're buying a $7 million deal right now in Minnesota, and for something like that, I'd like to have $500K. Just liquid.
Perfect. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, we just bought an asset for $9 million in Atlanta. We've got a $500,000, but it's a B asset and it's 100% occupied. I mean, we've already met before we closed. We met our first year numbers. The existing management had gotten our first year numbers, which was incredible. And then, but we've got an asset that's more of a C asset in Cincinnati. We've got $1 million sitting in the bank.
Yeah,
just in case. Yeah, and so good. Now, the other thing that we do is we look at our break-even point, and we're very, very conservative on that. Do you do anything special there, or what? No,
I guess when we're going into the deal, we're valuing our value add plan based off of that market. So if we're in a market where we've got high demand, vacancy is very low, and we feel very confident that we can beat the competitors in our area. Mm-hmm. We're looking at more of a 5-year plan of how we're gonna hit those numbers. Now, I mean, if you're looking at how to break even and not lose investors' money, gosh, if you do that, I feel like you get an F, and you shouldn't be a syndicator personally. Mm-hmm. If that's what you mean when you say a break even point.
Well, I lost $50 million. So I am, hit me once, shame on you, hit me twice, and it's my own damn fault. Okay. And so for example, that Cincinnati asset, it'll break even at 65% occupied. So I mean, if the world falls apart, we're okay. Okay. Gotcha. Because even in '08, my multifamily assets only lost 11% in rents. And so, easy to sustain. That asset in Atlanta, 68%, we can be. And so again, I am super conservative based on what's happened to me. I like to look at worst case and work backwards from there. Yep. I'm not saying that you have to do that, but I believe in the lowest leverage you can get and still have great returns. And I'm blessed because, when we have 500 students around the country sending deals in. We bought 1,500 or 1,400 doors with our students in the last 18 months, less than 18 months. And so, I'm kind of nice that in a nice place with that, so we can really kiss a lot of frogs and move through them quickly and find really screaming deals. But anyway, that's why I asked the question.
Great. Yeah, that's good stuff. I think that's a great way to go about it, and something extremely important to be looking at right now. Definitely.
Yeah. Art, let me ask you this now. If you've got CapEx projects going right now, I assume you're making distributions right now. Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. We do have some CapEx projects going on a deal in Minnesota. We have some going on a deal in New Mexico. We did stop distributions for a little bit. We've just restarted them since we, haven't seen much of an effect thus far.
Right.
We are seeing some delinquencies this month creep up compared to previous months.
Right.
But nothing again where you look at that income or your net rental income and you're concerned. It's minimal. So yeah, that's where we're at.
Okay. Now I know you're doing due diligence literally today on an asset. Talk about what you did. Just enlighten my listeners as to what you did today, what you're doing. Maybe you were there for a few days. What are the sorts of things you're doing, just for those that have never experienced someone doing due diligence? Enlighten them.
Yeah, you bet. So we're here today with our property manager that's going to be managing the property, assuming we do close. We like to have our property manager complete due diligence so they get to know the property along with us. Mm-hmm. We're basically going through all 140 units and investigating everything you can think of. Everything: exterior, windows, siding, foundation, roof, electrical, plumbing, you name it. We're verifying the condition of the property to make sure that we're not caught with our pants down, for lack of a better term, when we close. If we can find anything and everything that's wrong with the property now, we can be prepared for it. It's the things we don't know about. We did just have a potential, it's early, we got to get the quotes back, potential deal killer with our mechanicals. Chillers are not good and the piping underground may need to be replaced. And when you start seeing that, we luckily have no hard money. Yeah, big money. Okay. Yep. And we have no hard money on the line. We've got 30 days to do our inspection. So, no harm, no foul, we'll walk if we need to. But, those are the pieces we're digging in on, and then a lease audit as well. Verifying the leases match up with the rent roll. Probably going to be needing some bank statements to verify their rent roll is and what utilities are matching up, just to be absolutely certain. And if a seller's being honest, you shouldn't have any problem releasing that information. I know we wouldn't.
Oh, at the very least, I just had a student back out of a deal that discovered that 14 of the units that were rented were being paid by the owner. Yeah. And these were occupied units. They were paying the tenant's rent to boost the NOI. And it's very, very hard to discover that, but luckily they did discover it. So guys, now you've got an idea. You're going to do a physical inspection, go through every single unit. I assume you video or take pictures in every single unit as well. You do the unit number first, and everything behind it is that unit. So, because you may not be in there for years, and so you know what's there. You of course check out everything around the property. You were smart. You had vendors that knew chillers. Go check that out, and roofs, of course, foundations, all that stuff. And then you do the paperwork. You do the contracts that are on the property. You pay special attention to laundry because they survived the deal, and the leases and rent roll and all that business. And you've got the hat on that says, why do I not want to do this deal? Right. And sometimes that's a tough shift to make mentally, because you are excited, you've got it under contract, and you're looking for reasons to do the deal, but you can't do that. You've got to put on that hat, because you'll subconsciously overlook something that you shouldn't overlook. You agree? That is a huge piece right there. When you get emotionally involved in these deals, you want them to work. But the reality is what the reality is. The truth is there, and the costs are there, and you better budget for them and be real on it, because when they come back, when you're looking to exit, I've been there before on deals we bought in Minnesota, our early deals, where if you didn't get the CapEx right and you're looking to exit, all of a sudden you've got a rabbit that people don't want. You got a deal that is hard to unload. So critical. Yeah. Yeah, and it's human nature. Once we make a decision on something, we're looking for reasons to bolster, shore up, substantiate that original decision. To buy that asset, you can't do that. You're going to be looking for reasons not to do it, because sometimes the best deal is the one you don't do. Good God, I mean, a chiller can be like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's a really big deal if that hadn't been discovered. So, okay, well. Let me ask you this. I've got a lot of listeners, and I love to ask a couple of questions. One of them is knowing what you know now. Is there anything you might do different with, knowing what you know now?
Yes, definitely. My mistake was not getting a thorough enough education sooner. If I could go back, I would have definitely brought on my CPA first as the quarterback, setting my business up, setting some very clear goals, which they help very much, and educated very much, but then take it a step further and do a deep dive into multifamily value add investing and learn from people who already have the results and who are crushing the game, and then just, repeat.
Yeah. Well, thank you for giving that subconscious plug for my coaching program. I appreciate that. It's so important. Let me ask you this. What motivates you, brother? What inspires you? Who inspires you, or what inspires you? Any famous quotes you love? Any people that you look up to that dead or alive?
Yeah, I'd say Michael Jordan. He just came out with this thing, The Last Dance. And watching him and hearing his mindset, I can relate so much. I mean, just the way he looked at it, the way he used anger and motivation to push him to do what he needed to do. He was super intense. He was laser focused. He wanted it so bad. He was willing to do whatever it would take for as long as it would take. And I love people like that. They inspire me. And if you haven't had a chance, check it out. The Last Dance.
No, I'm definitely going to check it out. I hadn't even heard of it. It sounds awesome. And I would tell you, I would venture to say it's not so much that he wanted it. He just decided it was done. It was going to happen no matter what. And that's, Think and Grow Rich talks about that, having a definiteness of purpose. All right. Awesome. And so, is there a question I haven't asked you that you wish I had that might add some more insight?
No, I mean, I think you touched on it pretty well. I think, it's not about what you're doing in life. It's about your desire for it. That's really what it is. Multifamily is just a vehicle to get to financial freedom for me. And it can be for whatever it is that you really like to do.
But you love it. But you love it.
Oh, gosh.
But you love it. That's the key thing, man. And that's so important, guys. So freaking important. So, all right. Well, listen, buddy, I really appreciate it. I know you're in your hotel room because you're doing the due diligence on a deal. I appreciate you taking the time to jump on and add some value. It's very much my pleasure to meet you. And I'm sure that we'll talk again very, very soon, my friend.
Looking forward to it, Rod. Thanks for having me.
You bet.
Rod, I know a lot of our listeners are wanting to take their multifamily investing business to the next level. Now, I know you've been hard at work helping our Warrior students do just that using our ACT methodology, which is awareness, close, and transform. Can you explain to the listeners how they can get our help?
You bet. Guys, we've been going nonstop for 3 years, building an amazing community of like-minded people. And our coaching students, which we call our warriors, have had extraordinary results. They've purchased thousands and thousands of units. And last year, we did over 1,000 units with our students. And we're looking to grow this group and take it to the next level. We're looking for people who want to follow a proven framework that's really step by step, and then leverage our systems and network to raise equity, to find and close deals, and to build partnerships nationwide. Now, our warrior community is finding success in any market cycle. So if you're interested in finding out more about how you can become more of our incredible network and take advantage of the incredible opportunities that are coming very soon, apply to work with us at mentorwithrod.com or text CRUSH to 41411. That's mentorwithrod.com or text CRUSH to 41411.